The family meeting. My dad beat me brutally for refusing to serve my brother like a maid. You're a girl. You serve him, Mom snapped. He's a boy. He deserves better. Do his laundry or get out. They had no idea what I would do next. At the family meeting, my father beat me in front of everyone. Not with words, not with shame, with a belt and a look that said, "You brought this on yourself." All I had done was say no. No, I wouldn't wash my brother's underwear. No, I wouldn't clean up his dirty plates after his midnight snacks. No, I wouldn't be the maid they raised me to be. You're a girl, my mother snapped. You serve him. He's a boy. He deserves better. That moment should have broken me. It didn't. It completed something I'd been building in silence for years. They thought the pain would bring me back in line. They didn't know it was the last time they'd ever touch me, order me, use me. I left that night, but I didn't just walk away. I dismantled them without a scream, without a scandal, just silence and precision. People used to say our house was perfect. The lawn was trimmed, the windows sparkled, my brother's shirts were always crisp, my father's coffee was always hot. They assumed it was my mother's doing. They never looked at me. I was the system. No one saw the unseen hands behind every chore, every meal, every list taped to the fridge. From the time I was 8, I learned that usefulness was the only currency that mattered. Not love, not respect, usefulness. My name is Hannah Whitmore, and for most of my life, I was my family's shadow. My brother Caleb never lifted a finger. If he spilled soda on the couch, I cleaned it. If he needed his uniform ironed at midnight, I stayed up. If he failed a test, I was scolded for not helping him study. I wasn't his sister, I was his staff. You're the girl. Girls keep the house running, my mom once said, folding her arms like she just quoted scripture. I used to think if I worked harder, they'd see me. That maybe, one day, I'd be something more than a name on a chore list. But no matter what I did, Caleb was always the sun and I was a shadow cast to serve him. My father ran the house like a general, no warmth, just orders. He believed discipline made strength and obedience was respect. Whenever I questioned something, he'd look at me like I'd betrayed the family name. You're not here to argue, Hannah, he'd say. You're here to contribute. That word, contribute, became a leash. It didn't mean be part of this family. It meant shut up and work harder. Still, I did it all. I made their beds, I folded their laundry, I memorized grocery lists, ironed pleats, soaked blood out of Caleb's soccer uniforms when he got into fights. He never said thank you. He just tossed more clothes on the floor. It was a quiet kind of servitude. The kind that doesn't scream, the kind that just grinds you down until you forget what it feels like to have hands that aren't always holding something for someone else. But the day of the family meeting, the day they decided I wasn't contributing enough, something cracked. Maybe it was the way Mom said, "He deserves better," like I was some defective appliance. Maybe it was Dad's glare, daring me to disobey. Or maybe it was Caleb's smirk, the kind that said, "You'll never leave." Whatever it was, I stopped being afraid. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. They hadn't broken me, they had trained me. And I was going to use every ounce of what they taught me, just not the way they intended. There were phrases in my house that echoed louder than footsteps. They didn't scream them, they didn't need to, they just let the words settle like dust in the lungs. Be useful. Know your place. He's a boy. You'll understand when you're older. I understood now, not because I'd aged, but because I'd seen the pattern. It wasn't about gender, it was about control, about shaping me into something that made their lives easier, quieter. Every time I stood up for myself, they'd flip the script. Don't be dramatic, you're just trying to start trouble. No one will ever put up with that attitude in the real world. They didn't raise me to be loved, they raised me to be palatable, to be a girl who smiled through chores, folded emotions like towels, and accepted orders like oxygen. But while they hurled commands, I started keeping score. At first, it was small. I wrote down every task I did in a notebook I hid in the lining of my backpack. Grocery lists, Caleb's laundry cycles, the exact time I had to set my alarm so Dad's coffee would be ready by 6 a.m. Then I added more. Times I was blamed for Caleb's mess. Times I ate leftovers while he got the hot meal. Times I was told to be quiet when I cried. It wasn't just a list, it was a record, a ledger. a system of unpaid labor and emotional taxation. And the more I wrote, the more I realized how much of my life had been stripped down to transactions. Affection was conditional. Praise was rare. But expectation? That was infinite. You're lucky we don't charge you rent. You think anyone else would tolerate your mouth? We feed you, that's love. But it wasn't love. Love doesn't come with receipts. The more they spoke, the clearer their hierarchy became. Caleb was the crown. Dad was the judge. Mom was the enforcer. And I? I was the system, the hands, the silence. They thought their words would keep me tethered, that they'd worn me down to routine. But those words did something else entirely. They crystallized my resolve. Because every, "you're just a girl," reminded me of what I wasn't allowed to become. Every, "do it without complaining," taught me how to work silently, which would soon become my greatest weapon. And every, "this is your duty," became another nail, not in my coffin, but in theirs. I stopped defending myself. I just listened, and wrote, and waited, because storms don't announce themselves. They gather quietly, and I was nearly ready. The day they called a family meeting, I already knew it wasn't about unity. Family meetings in our house weren't conversations. They were courtrooms, and I was always on trial. That night, I walked into the living room and saw the three of them already seated. Dad in his recliner, Caleb sprawled across the couch like royalty, and Mom standing with her arms crossed like she'd rehearsed this. "Sit," Dad said. I didn't, I stood. "Caleb says you haven't been doing your part," Mom began, tilting her head like she was disappointed in a pet, not a person. "He says his laundry hasn't been folded, his bathroom's a mess. You've been slacking." I blinked. "He's 17. He can fold his own damn shirts." Dad's hand twitched. Caleb smirked. Mom's jaw tightened. "Watch your tone," she snapped. "He's a boy. He deserves better than this." I looked around the room and realized they genuinely believed that. It wasn't performance, it was doctrine. "He deserves clean clothes," she added. "He deserves peace in his home." "And I don't," I said quietly. "I cook, I clean, I do everything." "And it's never enough, is it?" "You're a girl," Dad said coldly. "You were raised to serve. That's how the world works." "No," I said, "that's how your world works. I'm not doing his laundry anymore, or his chores or yours." That's when he stood, and when my body instinctively took a step back, I knew what was coming. "Do his laundry or get out," he roared. When I didn't move, he did. He lunged, not with warning, not with restraint. The belt wasn't even hidden this time. It was on the table, waiting like it had been invited. He grabbed it, looped it once around his fist, and swung. The sound cracked through the room like a whip across silence. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared. The second hit landed across my back. I gritted my teeth. The third caught my arm. I stumbled. "You've forgotten your place," he shouted. Caleb didn't move. Mom didn't blink. They weren't shocked. They were satisfied. And in that moment, I realized they didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a failed investment. When it stopped, or maybe when he grew tired, I straightened up. My voice didn't shake. "I'm not your servant." Then I turned and walked out. No suitcase, no tears, no goodbye. Just one last look at the three people who had spent my whole life telling me to be useful, and who would finally understand what it meant to lose the one person who kept their house breathing. I didn't pack. I didn't take my clothes, or my school books, or even the tiny stack of birthday cards I'd hidden under my mattress. The ones with half-hearted messages, like, "Make us proud, Hannah." I just left. A hoodie, a charger, a bruised arm, and a notebook, zipped inside my backpack. That was it. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I didn't even look back. I wanted the silence to be the loudest thing they heard. I walked 2 miles to Amara's place, my best friend since 6th grade. Her porch light was still on. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask what happened. She just stepped aside and said, "Come in." That first night, I slept on a yoga mat with a balled-up hoodie for a pillow. It was hard. Cold. My ribs ached. My arm throbbed. But for the first time in my life, no one expected anything from me. No one asked for dinner. No one demanded silence or servitude. The next morning, Amara's mom made pancakes, real ones, with syrup and laughter in the kitchen. I sat at the table like I didn't belong. "You okay? Staying a few days?" she asked gently. I nodded. She glanced at my arm. "More than a few then." They gave me a blanket, cleared out a corner of the storage room, put down a mattress, a second-hand dresser. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. In those quiet days I waited for something, a text, a call, a threat, some recognition that I had left, that I had mattered enough to chase. But none came. My phone stayed silent. "No. Are you safe?" "No, come back." Just silence, the same kind they always forced on me. But this time, the silence wasn't theirs. It was mine. And I was about to weaponize it. It started with a list, not for revenge, not yet. Just to remember, I opened my notebook and titled the page, "Things I Did Before They Said I Wasn't Enough." I wrote fast at first, the obvious ones: cooked 3 meals a day, cleaned Caleb's bathroom, ironed school uniforms, grocery runs, packed lunches. Then came the deeper ones: hid my own report card so Caleb C's wouldn't look bad, took the blame when he broke Mom's blender, stayed up to reheat dinner when Dad worked late, even when I had exams, apologized for things I didn't do. It didn't stop. The list kept growing, 10 pages, then 15, then more. It wasn't just a record, it was a ledger, and every entry whispered one truth. They owed me, not in money, in respect, in care, in acknowledgement, and they would never pay it. That's when the shift happened. I stopped asking why they hadn't called. I stopped waiting for their guilt to kick in. Instead, I began preparing. I started by filing for financial independence. With Amara's mom as a witness, I submitted paperwork to revoke their access to my school records, my health files, anything they might try to control later. I got a new debit card under my name, transferred my student savings, locked my phone carrier so they couldn't suspend my line. Then I scanned the bruises, not for the police, not yet, just to have. I wasn't planning a scandal, I wasn't writing an exposé, I didn't want drama, I wanted clarity. I wanted the next time they looked around their home and wondered why everything felt heavier, colder, quieter, they'd remember me. Not in anger, not in guilt, in absence. Because I wasn't the daughter they lost, I was the air they forgot they were breathing, and now they'd have to learn how to suffocate without me. 3 weeks passed, still no call, still no text, just a growing silence that was no longer empty, it was electric. Then one morning, while helping Amara's mom carry groceries to the porch, I heard the first crack. "Ran into your mom at the store," she said casually. She looked worn out. Couldn't lift a gallon of milk without wincing. I didn't reply. She asked the clerk for help bagging, said her back was out, but she looked more overwhelmed than hurt. I nodded, barely. That night, I opened my notebook again, flipped to a fresh page, titled it, "What They Lose Without Me." The next day, Amara's cousin Maya, who lived 2 blocks from my old house, sent a picture. Caleb, outside the laundromat, his clothes stuffed in a trash bag. He looked confused and furious. A week later, my father showed up late to work 3 days in a row. A neighbor told me he'd started snapping at clients. Rumor was, HR had written him up after he blew up in a staff meeting. And then came the message. My phone buzzed, a number I hadn't blocked because I didn't need to. "Mom, Caleb has an awards dinner this Friday. None of his suits are ironed. You need to stop being ridiculous and come home." No greeting, no apology, just a demand dressed as an invitation. I didn't answer. 4 days later, another text. "Dad, this is childish. No one will tolerate your behavior in the real world. Come home, apologize, and we'll let you earn your place again." Let me earn it. I laughed. A dry, bitter sound. I took screenshots, not for evidence, for myself. As a reminder, this is who they are. By then, I'd enrolled in a local community college nursing program, lived full-time in the spare room at Amara's, helped with dinner, took the bus, studied late. It was hard, but it was real and mine. Meanwhile, back at the Whitmore house, the systems I used to uphold were buckling. Neighbors began whispering. Caleb started skipping school. One teacher emailed the house twice, no reply. My mom asked the church for help with meals, claiming a mobility issue. And yet, they still pretended I was just away. "They're telling people you left for an internship," Amara said one night, "that you're pursuing maturity. Maturity. Funny how they only praised it when it suited their lie. I didn't correct anyone. I just kept building my life. Then, I packed a box. Inside it, all the handwritten chore lists they used to stick to the fridge. The birthday card where Mom wrote, "We didn't plan for you, but God has a purpose." The broken locket she gave me at 13 with the words, "So you remember we didn't have to keep you." And finally, the ledger. I printed it. 52 pages. Bound it. Labeled the front. Unpaid labor. Years. Dacet. 17. I taped the box shut. No note. Just an address label. No return. I left it on their doorstep at dawn. 2 days later, Maya texted. "They didn't come out for hours. Then your dad opened the box. He looked pale." Good. Because I wasn't loud. I wasn't violent. But I was exact. I'd taken everything they once demanded, my labor, my silence, my usefulness, and returned it in the form they feared most. Documentation. Proof. Proof they never expected me to collect. Proof of what happens when the backbone of the household walks out and doesn't come back. No headlines. No scandal. Just silence, sharpened into truth. I moved into a studio apartment 2 blocks from campus. It was small, one window, a creaky floor, a shower that ran either scalding or freezing, but every inch of it was mine. I worked part-time at a local bookstore, studied at night, took nursing classes during the day, packed my own meals, folded my own laundry, 2 loads a week. Quiet, peaceful. Every Friday, I lit a candle. Not for healing, not for memory. Just because I could. No one barked orders. No one slammed doors. No one looked at me like I owed them something just for existing. And still, the world didn't collapse. I didn't fall apart. I didn't come crawling home. I thrived. Meanwhile, updates trickled in not because I asked, but because the world is small, and pain leaves echoes. A girl from church messaged me. "Your dad passed out in the grocery store. They say it was stress." Amara's cousin saw Caleb at a job fair, angry, disheveled, yelling at a volunteer because his resume got wrinkled. My mom had joined an online support group called Parents of Ungrateful Children. She posted threads titled, "When They Forget Who Fed Them." They hadn't changed. They just collapsed inward, angry at the vacuum I left behind, but never brave enough to name it. And I no longer needed their shame to define me. I no longer needed their absence to hurt. Because I had learned something they never taught me. Peace is louder than pain if you stay quiet long enough to hear it. They say revenge is a fire, but no one talks about the kind that doesn't burn. Mine was cold, controlled, clean. I never screamed at them online. Never aired my story in public. Never knocked on the door to say, "Look what you lost." Because I didn't need to. Every dish I wash now is mine. Every shirt I fold is for me. Every sunrise I wake up to feels like a quiet protest they'll never hear and still can't silence. Sometimes I wonder if the house still smells like bleach and frustration. If they still print out to-do lists and tape them to an empty fridge. If Caleb ever figured out that microwaves don't load themselves. If my mom ever stops flinching when someone says my name. If my dad ever looks at his belt and remembers that it wasn't obedience he beat into me. It was resolve. The last time I passed the old neighborhood, I didn't slow down. I didn't glance at the porch where I once left that box. I just kept walking, keys in my pocket, grocery list in my hand. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. They taught me to serve, so I let them collapse without me. They trained me to be silent, so I made my silence the sentence they now serve. They called me worthless, and I gave them exactly that. Nothing. Not a scream. Not a plea. Not a single moment of my new life. I didn't burn their house down. I just took the warmth with me. And now, when they sit in the cold silence of what used to be control, they'll finally understand what I was worth. Because revenge isn't the fire they expect. Sometimes, it's the echo of footsteps walking away, and never coming back.